This video describes how to route pipework, add radiators to fan core units, etc. So the starting point is when you come into the piping program, you get the general information dialog box with the default pipe database. You would have seen the video, or you may not have seen the video on the piping database section. If not, review it. It's available there. You can go in and create your own database. First thing you do is select your selection rules from the pull-down listing. So I'm going to take something fairly simple, LT heating, copper table X, and we can also do the same with our chilled water system, where we can apply our selection rule we've either created from the database or merely selecting. You'll notice a preview button. This allows you to preview the design parameters used to design the pipe runs based on the database information. Likewise with chilled water. We can enter the various parameters in here in terms of our design options. If we're doing a very simple layout and we're not doing any drawing, we can actually use similar returns, and that will automatically run the returns. You won't see them on the layout. Once you're committed to showing your similar returns, you can't undo that process. So you have to be mindful of your future process, whether you're exporting to 2D AutoCAD or to Revit via the MEP links. You wouldn't want to use a similar return. So this is for basically getting pressure drop counts very quickly without interfacing with any drawings. You can, if you wish, fix the final connection sizes. Again, at the moment, this is a general dialog box, so if you put some fairly large fan core units in, it will fix them at this size. So you've got to be mindful of that. So if you're having a mixture of fan core units and larger loads where you expect greater than 15mm as your final connections, don't fix the final connections. Next up for selection is the Radiator Database. You browse. That takes you into the main DB section where we select radiators, and we then select our radiator manufacturer that we want to use. This then gives us the ranges, and we can then select the ranges of interest. So we can select anything from the Stelrad Vita range in this case. We could amalgamate older ones into this database as per the video on the radiator databases, and we can select the databases that we want, the radiators that we want to use from the database. We can also apply regulating valves. So we can take a database from a range of manufacturers using the browse option. This takes us into the range of valve selections, and we can then select the preferred valve that we want to use. And also we have regulating valves. We can select the type of valve that we want to use as well. The first thing we need to do is to select our room spaces. So bearing in mind at the bottom here we've got our plant room with our boiler selections. Ideally the best way to do this is to run pipe runs to the uppermost floor down to the plant room. So if we view level up, this takes us to the top floor, and I'm going to run some radiators from the furthest part of the building to establish my pipe run all the way down to the plant room. So to place the radiators in the space, we select the room space. There's the room in the bottom left corner there. We then go to the Insert menu, and we decide whether we're doing a heating or cooling from the Systems menu. In this case, we're using radiators, so we're looking at heating. We then select the radiators option, and this will give us the heat loss from the space based on the results from the energy program, or whether imported from TAS or any other system. And it automatically looks at the number of windows as a starting point from the model. Now in this case, this particular model was imported from Revit via GBXML. In plan form you can only see 3 windows. The reason it picks 6 windows is because we have openable sections in plan form. We don't want to be influenced by those, so I'm going to select 3 windows. We can select our selection accuracy, and then we can run a search. Prior to doing that, we can actually apply our connections. So we've got top, bottom, opposite entries and various combinations. We can select our mounting height. So I'm going to mount this 100mm above the finished floor level on the top floor. And then we can initiate a search, and that comes up with a range of radiators that will offset our heat loss. The height limit and the length limit are determined by the sill height below the window based on the mounting height and the width of the window. These values can be edited and changed. If we extend the selection accuracy to say 20% and run a search, that comes up with a further range of radiators. You may have noticed earlier on in the general information there's an option there for percentage margin. It's always best to actually apply your margin at this point with your selection accuracy, because that will always be above the minimum requirement for the room space. So it will take the 3.13 kilowatts and add 20% of that as a tolerance margin. And you can see here, there, you then have the outputs from the radiators. So I'm going to select the first one in the list, 300 by 1000. We then place the radiators, place them in the room. It will snap to the windows. If you've defined the windows by hand from a self-defined model that you've done yourself, then they will snap to the middle of the windows that you interpreted from the room takeoff. I can then move into the next room and repeat the process. Picking the same radiator type and placing them on the layout. If I want to apply different sizes of radiator in the space, it's up to me to apply the proportion when placing the radiators. So if I select the room space and insert radiators, what I'm going to do is select the number of radiators 2, and the first 2 radiators are going to offset 1.9 kilowatts. I run a search on that, and that comes up with a range of radiators. I then select the place button. That leaves me the remaining 1 radiator to offset 0.93 kilowatts. Run the search on that one. So I can then run a different size of radiator if I wish. I could also place them against the wall. You don't have to place them against windows. If I want to edit radiators, I can double click on a radiator itself, selecting the room, double click on the radiator and run a search for the new output. There's my new output of 0.96, run a search, and that then gives me a change. So that gives me a selection of radiators that will now offset the output for that particular radiator. So if the windows changed or any other criteria within the space change, I can then apply radiator and then select OK. And that then changes the radiator's length. So you don't need to delete radiators to re-enter them. If you do want to delete a radiator, merely select the radiator so it goes in green, press the delete key on your keyboard, and that will then remove that radiator. And of course, if that was the case, you would then have to go to each of these radiators, increase their output to match that of the space.